And first of all, we have Anne, now I've forgotten how to put it, Anne Kveim Lie.
You do well.
Who is from the University of Oslo, and she is an associate professor in medical history at the Department of Community Medicine and Global Health. She has been interested in the history of disease broadly defined, including how ideas and practices, as well as their biological manifestations, have changed through time. Anne's research interests focus on the history of technology, the history of reproduction, and the history of therapeutics and their regulation. So it's over to you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you to all you organizers for making this wonderful event. I mean, I never thought digital conference could feel and be this way. So I'm really grateful for being able to be here. So, okay, so I'll, now I left you with the slide I was not going to show you. But let's start. So just first, a couple of words of where I come from. So I'm a physician at the bottom. I work every summer as a physician, but my entire professional life has been in academia, working with medical history. I also have a degree in history of ideas. But I mean, coming from where I come from, I've always been very anthropocentric in my research. So I've been doing, you know, interested in health and healing and suffering, and not really worked much on things outside of course, technologies, practices, pharmaceuticals. So it's not entirely true, but I've never worked on the history of microbes, which is what I'm going to take you into. So it's in this talk, and it started with my interest in, well, my interest in my engagement in the Lifetimes project, of course, but also my interest in antibiotic resistance, which I've been working on for the last 5 years, the history of antibiotic resistance, this is just an image from one of the, well, it's not recent anymore, it's from 2016, where the Chief Medical Officer of the UK launched the annual report highlighting antibiotic resistance as a global challenge on par with terrorism and climate change. So that was sort of sparked this whole global, it's not that it had not been an international and global topic before, but then it really sort of started rolling, not just because of that, it was also other things happening at the time. So, and many of you know this. So, yeah, I'm not going to read this because we are going to go out of time, but this is also, I mean, this kind of public discourse has been guided by new ways of warnings that I have not seen before in my historical work, like this kind of anthropomorphism, portraying microbes as warriors trying to attack us, and they worry me in many ways. I will come back to that, but it sparkled my interest, and I think I have another one. Yes, this sort of apocalyptic scenarios portraying microbes taking over the world, which is of course one way of taking decentering or narrative towards microbes, but not in a way I think it's neither healthy nor useful for us. But it started this sort of engagement with these current imaginaries of microbes actually got me interested in the history of microbes, and as a historian, I also want to tell you that I mean, I'm new to the history of microbes, but I'm also struggling with how to write temporality and time into my historical narrative as a historian. You know, it's just so paradoxical. We're historians, and some of you in this audience may be historians too, and you might recognize the problem, but the challenge, I think, is to sort of keep a rich and nuanced attention to temporality without and how to write historical narratives and bringing temporality in. I mean, I'm struggling with that, and you will see that, and all kinds of ideas and suggestions you might have for that would be welcome. But these are, of course, other images that have been made during the last 5, 6, 7 years or so, portraying much more friendly. I mean, if you have access to an electron microscope and staining techniques, you can show how wonderful microbes can look like. This is from the gut, showing important collaborators of human going into important relations. So, but just let me go back. So many of you know this story, right? Penicillin was developed as a result of the war, with lots of funding from war machinery. It sparked this huge pharmaceutical industry, research-based pharmaceutical industry, and in the matter of 5, 6 years, pharmaceutical industry was the most the industry with the most income in the US. So it was just this explosion of investments and production of massive antibiotics, and this, of course, made an impact on, or not, of course, yeah, this made an impact on microbes. Microbes changed as a result of this. And one of the reasons why antibiotics were pouring out so quickly was that people had this image, and why antibiotics were produced in the first place was that people had this is Ehrlich 40 years earlier, having the idea that there could be specific there was specific targets on microbes that could be directed by interventions, therapeutic inventions. So the idea was that the antibiotic was a bullet that sort of miraculously was goal directed and could hit a microbe without killing the body and without killing anything else. Of course, we all know now that that was not true, that instead of being goal directed and specific, these were actually mitrailleuse guns. I mean, they were hitting anything or everything else as well. And also antibiotics were increasingly used in industrial farmings, and actually a prerequisite for the industrial farming because antibiotics were used as growth promoters, creating thriving and new environments for microbes, because they would change totally as a result, because in order to adapt to these new antibiotics, they had to create mechanisms to resist, and their mode of being and their mode of acceleration changed as a result of this. They had to develop faster. So a microbe has an average lifespan of between 5 and 15 hours. Some of them really had to speed up in order to confront this new environment where they found themselves bathed in antibiotics. So I think I'll go through that. And so then it was increasingly recognized that microbes were actually adapting pretty well to this new ocean of antibiotics. They were developing, before the 1950s, it was thought that microbes developed primarily through inheritance, or vertical inheritance, mutation, and that was pretty slow. But then now it was shown that this resistance, that the resistant genes could also be transferred horizontally between microbes and between different microbes, which created a totally new environment for a new possibility for them, but also new problems for human and animal medicine. So this is just a few captions. I mean, so there's so many presents and past and futures in this story. This is, I don't know whether you can see this, but this is an editorial in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals, saying that we will soon be taken back in the pre-antibiotic Middle Ages in the treatment of medicine if nothing is being done. So that was, and that was as a result of them seeing that this was actually taking place. And of course, for the pharmaceutical industry, this was wonderful because they could develop ever new antibiotics. And then another microbe started to thrive in other areas as well. So here, this is just a photo from an early version of an intensive care unit where there's lots of new hard surfaces. And what do microbes do there? Well, they form biofilms, meaning that they gather. There's new kind of relationships that microbes make on hard surfaces like plastic and all these kinds of disposable things that are developed at hospitals and at other places in the course of the 1960s and 70s. And so here you see I have and this is a contemporary image, but it pretty much, this is also knowledge that is being formed about microbes in the 1970s, that they actually gather, form at this surface you see at the left, and then make buds where they thrive and reproduce and are inaccessible to antibiotics. So there's also a whole new way of reproducing and doing formation within these biofilms. There's in this story there's the result then, what are we sitting with now is like Hannah Landecker, some of you might know her, has described as the historical imprint of genes in the present, because these microbes, the resistance they developed to antibiotics throughout these 50 years, they can actually be seen in the contemporary genome. So the history has been imprinted on their genes. So we have and that is patterning, and that has also changed how they have been moving around in the world, procreating, how the speed with which they have been changing. And it has also changed our view of the medical future. It has changed our view of the medical past. And it remains to be seen how they will adapt in the time to come. Okay, thank you. I think I will stop there. Thank you very much for listening.